Hello folks, welcome to the Malware Monthly for July and August. This is our weekly roundup episode, so if you missed any of the videos from earlier in the week, you can watch them all here and now in one convenient package. We're going to be discussing the Twitter hack, Emotet TrickBot, and ransomware, so sit back, relax, here comes the facts. Morning, Joe.
Morning, Adam.
So did you hear about that Twitter hack from July?
No, what happened?
Hackers were able to access the accounts of 130 high-profile figures like Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and Elon Musk.
How did they do that?
By getting access to some administrative employee panel.
And how did they get access to that?
Apparently, the hackers called the Twitter employees on their phones and tricked them into handing over their passwords.
Wow, that worked?
Yeah, apparently they called a lot of people, got a few passwords for accounts with fewer accesses, and worked their way into compromising accounts with more accesses. Then reset the passwords for 45 of the targeted accounts and logged in.
What do they do with those accounts?
According to Twitter, 130 accounts were targeted, 45 of them had tweets sent by attackers, 36 accounts had their direct messages accessed, and a few accounts had their Twitter data archive downloaded, whatever that means.
Wow, what did the tweets say?
They were all Bitcoin gathering scams. Each tweet claimed that the user was giving back by sending people double the Bitcoin they put into a particular wallet.
Did that work?
Yes, it did. The wallet collected around $120,000 worth of Bitcoins. It could have been a lot more. But Coinbase, the US-based cryptocurrency exchange, blacklisted the Bitcoin addresses for the hacker's wallet. It prevented almost 1,000 users from getting scammed and sending Bitcoin worth approximately $280,000 to the bad guys.
Holy cow, so what did Twitter do?
They blocked all accounts involved from tweeting for 3 hours while they cleaned it up. They're improving tools to identify unauthorized accesses to their internal systems and doing company-wide phishing training.
Was there anything that the victims could have done to protect themselves from getting hijacked?
Apparently not. The administrative tools the hackers gained access to could disable two-factor authentication. Though after this, enabling two-factor authentication on your Twitter account will probably be more secure than it used to be.
True that.
So have you heard that Emotet's back?
Oh crap, really?
Yep.
When did that happen?
Researchers started collecting new Emotet campaign emails around July 17th, after Emotet had been quiet since about February 7th.
What's it doing?
Emotet has been going after enterprise networks for almost 2 years now, ever since it upgraded from being a consumer-focused banking Trojan. These days it acts as a delivery mechanism for other malware families, and the actors behind Emotet have put a lot of investment into how well their malware is able to compromise systems and spread.
What kind of features did they invest in?
Well, a new feature they rolled out is the ability to not only spread through existing thread, but also hijack shared documents, attaching them to the email along with malicious Office documents it uses to infect the system.
What do you mean by existing thread?
Either the actors behind Emotet are using pre-created templates that appear to be a reply to an email, or they hijack existing email threads from infected victims' email accounts and use them to fool their coworkers. Apparently, Emotet added an attachment and contact stealer module in early June, and it has the ability to steal email attachments, contacts, and the content of the emails.
So it's not just using the emails from outside the network, but from inside too.
Yeah, although it's still attempting to infect users from outside of the network with interesting campaign themes.
Like what?
Well, in August, Emotet started using COVID-19 themes to fool users into opening attachments. It's not new, and a lot of other malware families have already been doing this basically since the pandemic started.
Okay, well, what's it trying to spread?
Emotet has had a close relationship with the bad guys who developed TrickBot, and the two pair together really well. Usually we'd see an Emotet infection through something like a phishing attack, then once Emotet lands on the victim system, it will both try to spread itself to more systems as well as deploy something like TrickBot. TrickBot is a Swiss Army knife of corporate network infection. So it uses a lot of tricks to find weak passwords, vulnerable ports on internal systems, and has been known to utilize legitimate penetration testing tools like Mimikatz and Cobalt Strike to map out and infect networks. After a big enough infection has spread, we'd see TrickBot deploy some kind of ransomware on all infected endpoints at the same time. Whether that was the original intent of the attack or just the final stage of it, we really can't say for sure.
What do you mean?
Well, both Emotet and TrickBot used to be banking Trojans, which means that they would get installed, hide out on a system, and wait for the user to log into their bank or enter their credit card information into a payment form, then steal that data. So for these families to only be used for infection and gaining persistence on the corporate network really seems like a waste. More than likely, they're also collecting whatever data they can while also trying to jump to all corporate systems.
That makes sense, but can we stop it?
Well, funny enough, there have been a lot of efforts recently to either disrupt or disable Emotet infections. For example, an operation called Emote Hack involved hijacking Emotet distribution sites and then replacing malicious payloads with GIFs and funny images like the Hacker Man meme. It actually stopped the Emotet group from sending more emails until they figured out how to stop it.
No way! How did that work?
Well, Emotet uses poorly configured or protected websites like WordPress site to host the malware that users download when they open the malicious document and activate the macro script. Apparently, the Emotet group deployed open source web shells on these hacked servers and also tend to use the same password for many of them. The theory, anyway, is that someone figured out what that password was, then started hunting for Emotet distribution servers and logging in using that default password.
Does anyone know who's doing this?
Nope. Emotet has been active for years, so it could be a security researcher or it could be another cybercriminal trying to mess up Emotet's groove.
You said there were efforts to disable Emotet. What's that about?
Yeah, there was this vulnerability in a version of Emotet that was released in February of this year, so researcher James Quinn from Binary Defense created an exploit to that vulnerability and called it Emo Crash. The first version of this exploit involved changing saved file names of Emotet victims in the registry, basically making it impossible for Emotet to activate and reach out to its command and control server. However, it didn't actually stop the installation. So, the second version was created that introduced a buffer overflow during Emotet's installation process. This was able to completely prevent Emotet from installing and worked prior to infection as well as during infection.
So, how long did that work for?
The exploit was created in early February, only a couple days after the new version of Emotet was released, so from then until August, it worked at stopping Emotet infections.
6 months? Wow! Didn't the Emotet gang know something was going on?
Not sure if they knew, but Binary Defense did a really great job of keeping the exploit under wraps and only released it to a few other security organizations.
So, do you think we'll ever see the end of Emotet?
Yeah, of course. But for now, researchers like our own Jerome Segura expect to see more disruptions of the Emotet botnet because of all the attention the malware has received, as well as all the efforts we've seen in 2020 to mess up their operations.
Time will tell.
Time will tell. So did you hear about TrickBot and Linux?
Wait, what's TrickBot again?
The TrickBot was first discovered in 2016 and used to be a dedicated banking Trojan tool stealing financial information. However, over the last couple of years, we've seen this malware become one of the most capable intrusion and lateral movement tools ever made. These days it acts as a modular Trojan, usually dropped as a secondary payload, meant to infect network systems by using exploits, weak passwords, brute forcing, and various other penetration testing tools.
Really? Like what tools?
Well, Cobalt Strike and Mimikatz are frequently used by TrickBot actors to collect data for the purpose of spreading, really.
And now it's targeting Linux?
Kinda. There is this framework that was created by the TrickBot actors, some say with the help of North Korea, called the Anchor Project. The Anchor Project is basically the pinnacle of all TrickBot's evolution over the years, giving a solid framework for corporate network exploitation, information theft, espionage, and monitoring.
So this isn't just a new feature for TrickBot?
It's more like individual TrickBot infections have been single alien invaders, while Anchor is their deployed mothership, supercharging all the infections and giving a lot more capability to the attackers. It was recently discovered that there is a version of Anchor that is targeting Linux systems. It also has the ability to deploy TrickBot infections to Windows systems on the same network and execute them.
Whoa, so it really is like a mothership.
Absolutely. However, according to researcher Vitaly Kremez, this version of Anchor is still in development, but everyone expects TrickBot to continue developing these tools and will likely be seeing a lot of them for a while. This framework is especially concerning because of a lot of web servers, IoT devices, and routers that run on some version of Linux, and they could all potentially be turned into TrickBot motherships.
That is very scary. These developers must be really good.
You would think. However, in early July, Vitaly Kremez discovered that TrickBot actors accidentally distributed their malware with a test version of a password-stealing module. The result was the default browser opening and warning the victims about an infection once the module is launched. Kremez explained to Bleeping Computer, quote, "The test module appears to be developed by the TrickBot devs as it is coded in the same fashion as other modules. He believes that the threat actors were testing a new version and forgot to remove it when it went live."
Looks like TrickBot needs to do better quality assurance.
Yeah, I'm sure their Yelp rating went down for this. So, ransomware's been active.
Don't you ever have any good news to tell me?
No. A recent study found that 25% of all UK universities have experienced a ransomware attack in the last 10 years, including Sheffield Hallam University, that had 42 attacks in the past 7 years.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, but most of the universities mentioned had been attacked multiple times. However, most of the universities that responded also reported they did not pay the ransom. Many just restored from backups.
That's great. So do you think universities in the UK will be better protected now that they've had 10 years of experience fighting ransomware?
It's hard to say, but one point made by Yonut Alessiu from Bleeping Computer mentions, quote, "The results from the FOIA are a poor reflection of the recent period, as close to half of all schools receiving the solicitation refused to give any information, motivating with concerns that admission of an attack would only encourage the hackers."
Would attackers go after an organization because it was already attacked?
I think logic dictates that going after a previous cybercrime victim is like trying to launch a sneak attack on an enemy who already knows you're coming.
So the experience from fighting ransomware would then make them more secure, right?
That's the theory, although clearly some folks believe that admitting you have been victim of a cyber attack is a sign of weakness or insecurity. You know, it happens to everyone. Then there are possible legal difficulties that may affect whether or not a company pays or even reports a ransomware attack.
Oh? How so?
The General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, is a European Union law that attempts to enforce the safe and secure protection of user data by organizations operating in Europe. Basically, things like databases which are unsecured and accessible online, or even something like having a flash drive with customer data being snatched from a table in a coffee shop could land a company in hot water with authorities and result in fines or worse. So, admitting that an attack occurred and inviting possible investigation into how secure or insecure your data storage policies are may be enough reason for some organizations to downplay attacks. In fact, a ransomware group has recently taken advantage of this and is using GDPR threats to try and extort victims.
What's that about?
So, servers running the MongoDB database software are being targeted by attackers who are focused on insecure deployments of the software, with the goal of accessing databases, stealing data, and replacing it with README files that demand Bitcoin payment in 48 hours, or else all the data gets released online.
And where does GDPR come into play?
Well, part of the ransom note claims that if the victim doesn't pay, not only will they release the files, but they'll also report the organization to GDPR authorities, which may lead to a fine or arrest, according to the note anyway.
How many databases have fell victim to this?
According to the person tracking these infections, Victor Gevers of the GDI Foundation, over 15,000 servers had their files replaced with that ransom note. He obtained this information after querying the internet device search engine Shodan. However, other scanners showed that up to 23,000 systems were still affected.
Wow, with all those victims, how much are they charging for the ransom?
The ransom note's about $135.
That's it?
According to Bleeping Computer article written by Lawrence Abrams and interviewing Victor Gevers, quote, "With the ransom amount being small, at $135.55, and the worry of GDPR violations, Gevers feels that it may cause some people to pay. The actors then know what data is valuable to the owner and extort them for even more money."
Guess that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's a lot less than Garmin had to pay.
Garmin, the watchmaker?
Well, they're more of a fitness brand now, with many tracking and GPS tools used by athletes and boats and regular people alike. They actually have a service that their application linked to in order to upload fitness data or other relevant information. Anyway, the company was hit by a ransomware known as Wasted Locker, and it knocked down a lot of those services in the process. The company ended up using a ransomware negotiation company called Arete IR to pay millions of dollars to the attackers and get everything back up and running again.
Who's behind it, do you think?
Well, Wasted Locker is a tool known to be associated with the Russian cybercrime gang Evil Corp.
Whoa.
Yeah, lazy name. Anyway, Wasted Locker has been on a bit of a spree over the last few months. In July, it was reported that the malware was found infecting networks of dozens of US newspaper websites. The hackers hosted Wasted Locker executables on those infected servers and, when needed, would download it from the same sites. The goal being to mask the malicious intent of the traffic by making it look like a user just reading the news.
So these guys are pretty sophisticated then.
Oh yeah, Symantec actually warned folks about this group a month before the Garmin attack was made public. These guys aren't messing around, they only seem to go after well-resourced and likely well-researched organizations, unlike other ransomware families we've seen in the past, who target anyone willing to run the malware.
What kind of tricks do they use that are different from other ransomware?
First of all, the malware was designed to defeat several behavior-based anti-ransomware tools.
How does it do that?
Most of these tools use the behavior of an untrusted executable doing ransomware-like things to identify possible ransomware infections. For example, encrypting files and deleting them. The malware reads the contents of a victim file into the Windows Cache Manager, then encrypts the data found in the cache, not the file on disk. Then, when enough of the data in the cache has been modified or encrypted by the ransomware, the Cache Manager automatically writes the modified data to the original file. In simple terms, it replaces the unencrypted legitimate file with the encrypted version, and it does this under the umbrella of a legitimate system process, not some shady exe file. So the idea is that if an anti-ransomware tool doesn't see the malware binary actually doing the ransomware stuff, then maybe it won't detect the malware.
And that works?
For some, probably. But vendors are already updating their tools to detect this kind of behavior, so it may not be a clever trick for much longer. At least until they figure out something new.
Wait, what?
Yeah, researchers believe that Wasted Locker is manually directed by attackers who utilize things like stolen passwords and suddenly outward-facing vulnerable network entry points that allow them to not just launch malware, but scope out a target and determine the best strategy for an attack. Something like that is more difficult to predict and defend against, especially when the actor is proven to be sophisticated and clever.
Do you think we're going to see more of Wasted Locker?
Absolutely. It's already proven itself multiple times over as being a dangerous and capable malware. Depending on what Evil Corp wants to do next, they could continue trying to ransom corporate networks, or they could set up shop and start selling modified versions of Wasted Locker to other cybercriminals. The ransomware as a service scene is very lucrative.
Ransomware as a service? What's that?
It's a term used to describe a cybercrime group that develops malware for individual customers to spread. This takes a lot of the overhead out of launching a ransomware attack because previously an attacker might have needed to develop, steal, or buy their own ransomware, then go about trying to infect people with it. The quality of that ransomware was not guaranteed, and it might not even work. With more advanced families of ransomware like Cerber and Locky, the value was in the proven effectiveness of the ransomware. The creators of these families only needed to make slight updates and provide individualized modifications to customers, like what email the victim should reach out to, who would then go about distributing the malware. Once a ransom payment occurs, the creators of the ransomware get their cut, and the distributors get the majority of the payment.
Isn't this dangerous for criminals, though? I mean, what if the guy that they buy the ransomware from decides to put a backdoor in it?
That is a common thing, and has happened many times.
Really?
Yeah, these days it comes down to reputation of the malware, as in, have there been news stories about it, or has it been proven in the wild, combined with the reputation of the creators and sellers of the service. Do they have good relationships with other criminals? Can they be counted on to come through on their end of the bargain?
And that keeps out shady vendors trying to scam their customers?
It's kind of like buying something off the darknet. You have to put your confidence into the seller that they will deliver the product that you are buying, and a lot of times that comes in the form of previous customer reviews. If a criminal developing malware was putting backdoors into what they were selling, someone would notice and tell other folks about it. Eventually, the vendor won't be trusted anymore, and nobody will buy their wares. So it really comes down to basic capitalism, I guess.
So wrap this all up for me.
Ransomware is on the rise again, focused on attacking corporations with malware that not only encrypts files, but also steals it. The tactics used to deploy these forms of ransomware have become more capable, and that amount of effort that goes into these attacks is far greater than what we saw 3 years ago. Ransomware is also evolving as we continuously see new tactics to evade detection and/or increase infection and encryption.
So we're doomed?
Yes, obviously. So we did things a little different this time around. Let us know in the comments below whether you liked it. That's it for this Malware Monthly. Check in next month for more stories and analysis concerning cybercrime. If you've been following the Malware Monthly, thank you for the views, the likes, and the shares. You are who we do this for. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.